All right, in this video, we're going to do something a little bit more advanced, and that is the use of parameter actions. And before we introduce that part, we're going to do a scatter plot again, right? And just set it up to begin with. So it's going to look something like this. And what the parameter action does, it lets you control these values. So let's say I wanted to create like a quadrant kind of analysis saying anything in this bottom left has a certain issue or anything in the top right is going really, really well. Okay, that's kind of really good for quadrant. Good for analysis, this kind of quadrant technique. And I can change these if need be on the fly. So let's say sales control, I wanted to drop this sales line down to 2000. Okay, I'm going to go 2000. And once I press enter, you'll also notice that the colors change. There you go. See, this one has, you got a lot more oranges here, a lot more blues. And again, very useful for reading points. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that. It's actually very, very simple. And let's start with a scatter. Okay, let's bring in our sales. Okay, and let's bring in our profit. Right, and in this example, I can't remember what I split with. I think I split it with manufacturer. Okay. So let's look for manufacturer and drop it into our level of detail tile here. Okay, and now it's split. And again, I've put it in the wrong way, so let's just transpose that. Right, that is part one. Now, what I'm going to do is just to make this analysis a little bit easier for this is instead of manufacturer, let's put in subcategory just to simplify things a little bit. Right, so we have a lot less points to have to deal with, so I can really see what's happening. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. Okay, and what I want to apply is that control. Okay, so I need a few things. Number one is I need a sales parameter. Okay, and I also need a profit parameter. Okay, once I have those two things, then I write a formula to control the coloring, which is actually very easy to do. It's just an if function, which I will walk you through. Okay, so let's go ahead and create these parameters. Now, parameters, if you've ever done algebra in school, it's really just a number, yeah? But the difference is you can control that number. You can change that number as you go. As opposed to if I did a formula, right? Create calculated field, and I just read 1. That number is fixed, right? There's no way to control it except for going into the formula. I can't create a filter off that, right? It's just a fixed number. A parameter is more of a variable where you can control the value after the fact, after you've set it up, right? So here's how you do it. It's very simple. Okay, we're going to go into this triangle button, right? And instead of create calculated field, we're going to go create parameter. Okay, and that's going to come up with this menu. And let's do the first one. Let's do it together, shall we? So let's go sales, right? Param 1. Okay, data type is float, meaning just a number, right? We're not going to get into what float means. And the first number we're going to set, and it doesn't matter really what we set because we're going to be able to change this later on, is for sales, let's set it to around here. So let's say 150,000. Okay, right? And I can just set it up as a standard number like this with no formatting. But because this is currency, let's introduce some currency formats. So currency custom. I'm going to get rid of the decimal places. Negative values is fine. Display units, I'm going to put a K for 1,000 just to make it a bit easier, right? And that's pretty much it. So I just click outside of that and go OK. And to see your parameter that you've set up, it's actually just down here. Okay, so it's a third category. You got dimensions, measures, and now parameters. Okay, so that's our first one. Now we need one for profit. Let's go create parameter. I'm going to call this, what do we call the one? First, profit param 1. Okay, and in this case, we're going to set it to, let's say, 25,000, just as a number. 25,000. Let's go display format, currency, K, I think, get rid of decimal place, and OK. Okay, that is stage 1 done. Easy. What you'll notice is these two parameters aren't connected to our analysis yet. They're just parameters. They're just like floating numbers. They're not doing anything yet. We have to introduce it to our data. And the way we do that is we have to create some sort of relationship or some sort of calculation to say something plus the parameter, or the parameter multiplied by so-and-so, or if the parameter is higher than something else, right? That's what creates a relationship. Now let's do the first one, okay? We'll do this in steps. Let's say for the profit, okay, that's our line, or maybe I think it was a bit higher than that. Let's say 25,000. Here is the calculation. If the sum of profits, right, which are each these individual points, right? So I'll just say sum of profit, okay, is greater than the parameter that we set. Let's just call it PP, right? Then call it 1 or call it 0. It doesn't really matter what you call it as long as they're different, okay? Then we use that outcome of that result to apply a color, okay? Because in our data, we've now created a new column of information, right? And I'll show you how that looks like. If we go create calculated field, and let's call this profit color, color control, right? And we're going to do an if function. So let's go if, okay, I'm going to go really slowly, the sum, right, of profit is greater than this, where is it? Profit param1. Okay, so we can bring that in here as a parameter. Notice it's purple, that's a new color, right? If it's greater, then I'm just going to say then 1, else, actually, no, should we say 1? Let's just make it yes. It's just easier. Else, then no. Okay, end. All right, and that's all it does. It just checks it and puts a yes or a no. So basically just checking if it's above or below that 25,000. And we go okay. We now have this new measure value here, right? And all we do is we drop that into color. Okay, as you can see, that is now above that 25,000. Okay, right? How do we know? Well, let's add a $25,000 line. Okay, if we go analytics, right, which is up here, right, we're going to use this reference line function to create that line. Okay, and you'll probably guess that for the reference line, we're going to use the parameter that we just made, right? So if we grab reference line, we're going to drop it into table, right? Because we want it for the whole thing, right? So table, and we're going to do it for profit. So we're only dropping it in profit, like so. And what you'll notice right before it kind of split is there is now a line there. And from here, we can control what happens to this line. We don't want this to be any value. We just want it to be the parameter that we created, which is profit param1. Okay? And that's pretty much all you have to do. You can add some formatting if you want, all right? Not totally necessary, but we'll put that in there. Okay, and we go okay, all right? And before we do the second line, which works a little bit differently, I'll show you the dashboard functionality. So let's create a dashboard, right? Let's bring that dashboard all the way over here. Okay, so sheet 16 is the one we made. Let's bring that into a dashboard. Oops, there we go. All right, my dashboard's a little bit big. Okay, oops, wrong one. Let's make that smaller. Okay, and I'm gonna add a filter control for this, for the parameter, right? And the way you do it is if you go analysis, you go parameters, and you want to add the profit param, okay, which is the one we made. And as you can see, we now have this filter. So if I change this to suddenly 35,000, and if I press enter, the colors also change, right? That's what parameters do. It lets you modify something after you've built it, as opposed to a fixed number, okay? So the question now is, how do I do 2 lines, right? It builds on what we've just done, okay? So let's go back. I'm going to get rid of this dashboard. We don't need this at the moment, right? And we go back to this one, right? Let's add in the second line that we did. So let's go analytics. Let's look for reference line. And we're going to add one for this time sales in the table one. So this one right here, make sure you add it to just this color, right? We now have that second line, okay? And we're going to change this to sales param1, which is the one we created. And again, let's just change the color to red, like so. And we go okay. That's it. The only thing we have to modify now is the formula, right? Right now, it's only checking if it's in this top section or this one. We also need an additional formula to check if it's here and here, which means, hopefully I'm not going too fast, you'll need 4 sets of conditions. This area, this area, this area, and this area. Okay? Hope you're following. And here's how you do it. You got to do it like quadrant by quadrant. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4. This one, what it looks at is if the profit is greater than the parameter, right? The profit parameter, and if the sales is greater than the sales parameter, okay? Because it's higher than this number. This one, what's the difference? Well, the parameter is still the same. So the parameter, the profit is less than the parameter, less than the parameter, like so. The sales is still in the positive region, still above this line. So sales stays the same. Okay, so sales parameter, right? This one, the top left, the profit is above the profit parameter, the line. So P is still greater than profit parameter, but the sales is now less than the sales parameter. Okay, there we go. And our last one is just less than. So if we go profit is less than the profit parameter, and sales is less than the sales parameter. Okay, so we just have to write 4 sets of equations. Sorry, I shouldn't say equations. 4 sets of conditions in an if function to create each of these groups. And it sounds hard, but it's actually very simple. You just have to write the first one. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go create calculated field. Okay, and we're going to use our if function. All right, let's bring it over here. And let's just do the very top one. So greater than. It's very easy. Let's call this parameter color control. And we're going to go if sum of profit, right, is greater than the profit, what do we call it? Profit param 1, okay? If it's greater, and we're going to do the sales one, sum of sales, okay, is greater than the sales param 1. Oh, hang on, what's happened here? Sales param 1, okay? Then I'm just going to say 1, okay? Then we're going to set the other 3 conditions, and this is how I do it, okay? I'm going to copy everything I've just written 4 times, all right? Because I got 4 sets of conditions. Let me just take off my watch. All these parameters is making my watch sweaty, right? So these are my conditions, and each one needs to be called something different. So what I do is I go 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? Then I close off the if function straight away. So I go else 0, end, okay? Right? So basically, if it's none of these, then just put it in 0, meaning it's probably right on the line, right? And then just close it off. And the way you can get around that is if you just put in equals here if you want to. Okay? If it's greater than or equal to, you can do that as well. I'm not going to bother. Okay? Right? Now we have to look at these combinations. Okay? So the first one in the top right was greater than. So this is quadrant 1. If we look at this one, the only difference is the parameter. So this time, it's the profit is less than the parameter, right? If we look at this top left one, it is profit, it's greater than the profit, but then less than the sales. So we're going to modify this one, right? Because it's less than the sales. And then the last one is just double less than, right? Like so. Then the very last step is to just add else here. Oops, else. Okay. Else and else. There we go. And the calculation is valid. Now let's walk through that really quickly. Okay. The reason you have to add else, right, is to go, if the first condition is not true, else if looks at the next condition. If that one's not true, then it looks at the next condition. If that's not true, it looks at the next condition, right? That's all the else if does, okay? Then in each of these conditions, we are comparing two things, right? One value against the first parameter and another value against the second parameter, and then allocating a certain number, right? That's basically all there is to it. So now if I go OK, right, I've now got this parameter color control. I can just drop that into color, like so, okay? And you'll see that this is actually changed to a continuous type of display. We're not really interested in continuous. We need this to be discrete colors. So we're going to go edit. I'm going to change this to discrete. And you'll see that we now have 4 sets of colors. Well, 3 because there's nothing in here. And the way we can do that is if we just reduce the profit parameter, which we will do in a dashboard. So let's go create a dashboard. Let's drop that over here. And let's bring number 16 in. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Right. Okay. Let's add those 2 parameters in. So we'll go analysis, parameter. And the first one is profit param 1. And the second one is sales param 1. Right? So let's change this 20,000. If I drop this down to, let's say 10,000, watch what happens with the color. Right? There we go. And now we have 3 because this one now has nothing. So maybe if I find something just above this profit, so let's say 18,000, maybe we can get 4 colors. There we go. So we now have that 4th color over there. Okay, and we can do the same thing for these sales. So let's drop this to, let's say 50,000. Right, and again that will change color. And that's how you combine the use of parameters into scatter plots, okay, or your XY scatters, or what else do they call them? I think they just call them scatters. Okay, so a little bit longer video, but again this was a little bit more advanced, so we need a little bit more time. In any case, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you at the next video.